For this lesson, we're going to be looking at simplifying rational expressions. So to start, let's go over what a rational expression is. So a rational expression is any expression that is a ratio of two polynomials. And what I mean by that is it's an expression that is expressed as y equals r over s, where r and s are both polynomials and s cannot equal 0, right? Because we can't divide by 0 and it would make the whole thing undefined. So for example, I have y equals x squared minus 2x plus 3. Now, the bottom cannot equal 0, so the bottom would zero out when x equals 1/4. And this statement that says x can't equal 1/4 is called a restriction. So basically what restrictions are they are the value of the variable that would make the bottom of the fraction equal 0. So in order to find what that number is, you can just set the bottom equal to 0 and solve for x. So when I solve for x equaling 1/4 would make the bottom equal 0. And because we can't have that happen, x cannot equal 1/4 in this equation. Okay, so if we want to simplify rational expressions, we have three main steps. The first step is to factor our numerator and denominator. So we did a little bit of practice factoring in the grade 10 review. But if you're still struggling with this, we need to make sure we practice our factoring and bring those skills back from grade 10. Next, we're going to reduce by canceling common factors from the numerator and the denominator. And finally, we need to find our restrictions by identifying what makes the denominator equal to 0, similar to what we did over here with 1/4. So the best way to learn how to do this is to just start doing examples. So we're going to do a bunch of them together so that you can just see a ton of examples. So let's start with example A. So we're going to simplify the following rational expression. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to notice that we have an r on the bottom. So for your restrictions, it's easiest if you start stating them throughout your entire process. If you notice that there is a number that r cannot be, we're going to write it down and just keep track of them. So right away, we have an r on the bottom, so r cannot equal 0. Now let's continue with simplifying. So the first thing we do is we factor the numerator. So I can common factor out an r here, all over r. And now because I have these two r's, I can cancel them out. So that will give me r minus 5. So although we have r minus 5 and there's no r's on the bottom in our final result, because we had an r in the denominator at one stage, that still counts as one of our restrictions, so we need to include it. Let's try another example. So for this example, we have w squared minus 6w plus 8 all over w minus 2. So to start, we're going to look at our denominator and see what would make the denominator 0. And in this case, that would be w equaling 2. So we can't have that, so w cannot equal 2. And now we're going to continue with the simplification. So the first thing we need to do is we need to factor the top. So we need to find two numbers that add to my middle number and two numbers that multiply to my last number. So that will give us -2 and -4, -2, -4. Since we have a 1 as our first term, we have a 1w squared. We can jump right to the brackets. Here we go. And now we can cancel out that w minus 2, and we're just left with w minus 4. Okay, let's do another one. So for C, first thing we need to do is we need to look at the denominator and see if there's anything that would make it 0 right away. So in this case, we can't have x being 0, and we also can't have y being 0 because both of those would make the bottom 0 out. Now let's simplify this. So we're going to be using our exponent laws. So we'll start by dividing the coefficients. So 30 divided by 6 is just 5. Then we can cancel out some of these. So we have 4 x's on the top and 7 on the bottom. So we can cancel out 4 of the x's. And then for my y's, we can cancel out 2 of the y's from the bottom. So we're left with 5y squared over x cubed. Next example. We have 12 minus 4t all over 4t. First thing that we do is we need to find our restrictions. So on the bottom, if t equals 0, it would 0 out the whole bottom. Now the first thing I want to mention here, and this is a very common error, we cannot cancel out the 4t's. And the reason why is because there's a subtraction sign here. We can only cancel out things that are being multiplied. So because these two things are being subtracted, we cannot just cancel stuff out. So we still need to factor, and that's our first step. So the most I can factor out of this is 4. So we have 3 minus t all over 4t. So now in the numerator, we have two things that are multiplied together. That means we can start canceling things. Now I can cancel those 4's. So I'm left with 3 minus t all over t. Okay, next example. So for this one, finding the restrictions right away is very hard. It's hard to know what numbers would make this equal 0 right away. So we're just going to start simplifying it, and then we'll find those numbers as we go. So let's start by factoring this. So we're going to factor the numerator and the denominator. So for the numerator, we need two numbers that multiply to -8 and add to 2. So that would be x plus 4, x minus 2, all over two numbers that multiply to 2 and add to -3 would be x minus 2, x minus 1. And now we can see our restrictions. So now we want to think, what would 0 out the bottom? Well, if this bracket was equal to 0, the whole bottom would be 0. So x cannot equal 2. And if this bracket were equal to 0, the whole bottom would be 0. So x also cannot equal 1. Now we see if there's anything that we can cross out. So we can cross out those two, and we're left with x plus 4 all over x plus 1, like that. Okay, next one here is y squared plus 9y minus 10 all over y squared minus 1. So right now it's a little tricky to find our restrictions right away, so let's get to factoring. So in the numerator, two numbers that multiply to -10 and add to 9. -10, oops, y minus 10 and y minus 1, like that. Oops. Sorry, got my signs mixed up. All over. This is a difference of squares. So I'm going to have y plus 1, y minus 1. So now I can see my restrictions. So y cannot be -1 or +1 because that would 0 out the bottom. And now I can cancel some things. I'm left with y plus 10 all over y plus 1. So now what I want you to do is there are some trickier ones here. So I want you to continue trying these on your own. Remember, first step is to factor, then cross things out and state restrictions, and then simplify. So give the rest a try on your own, and I'll post all of the solutions.